Company. Welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And welcome, assembled company. Tonight we have none other than from the far side of Ireland, nearly in the Atlantic Ocean. Somewhere I dragged him out of some years ago, wrung him out, and left him. Actually, I think the last time we were together, it was in a cave in Clare or County Clare or somewhere. No, the last time we were together, we actually was in Marrakesh, but the time before that was in a cave in County Clare. And so, ladies and gentlemen, could you please put your hands together and welcome for the first time on Friday night, Anthony Galvin-Healey. Take it away.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Hello, boys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, and banana heads. Now, if that didn't cover you all, let's try again. Hello, girls, boys, gentlemen, ladies, and silly sausages. That covers most of us, I think. My name is Anthony Galvin-Healey, but people call me Tony Baloney. And don't blame me. It's not my fault. It's my mother's fault. She was Tony Salami. My dad was Tony Macaroni, and they had to call me something, and that's how I ended up being called Tony Baloney. But it could be worse. I could be my sister. They called my sister Tony Lasagna. So let's talk stories. That's what I'm going to tell you about today, because I've loved stories since I was tiny. I missed that. Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Someone needs to mute themselves.
Yes, I've been so long off Zoom that I've forgotten all about muting and everything like that. But as I said, my name is Tony Baloney, and I have loved stories since I was tiny. And my grandfather, do any of you boys and girls... Sorry, can we mute everybody?
That's just one person.
I think Satan, you're coming across on you're the only one that's not muted, but I can't see a microphone on your thing. Can you make sure you're muted? Thank you.
Excellent. We'll start again. Hello, boys and girls. No, we're not going to start again. We're going to start right in where we are now. As I said, when I was tiny, I used to love stories, and I used to love listening to my grandfather. Hands up if you have a grandfather that you really love, but that really annoys you. Yes, that's my grandfather. I loved him, but he used to annoy me by saying silly things. He'd see me scrolling on my phone, and he'd say, in my day, we didn't have a phone. We had to make our own entertainment. Or he'd see me reading a book, and he'd say, oh, in my day, we didn't have books. We had to make our own entertainment. Or he'd see me watching television. He'd say, in my day, we had to make our own entertainment. Well, one day I said, okay, Granddad, how did you make your own entertainment? And he told me how they'd spend their evenings. He said they'd finish their dinner and they'd all sit down on the sofa at home, and they'd all turn and they'd look at the wall. And after a while, somebody would say, this wall is fierce boring. I wonder, is there anything on the other wall? And they'd all turn around and they'd look at the other wall. And you know what? There'd be nothing on the other wall either. And eventually they would be so bored that there'd be a knock on the door, and they'd open the door, and in would walk somebody carrying a fiddle, and they'd play a bit of music, and everyone would dance around the tables, and they were all so happy. And then the person with the fiddle would go away and go to the next house, and they sat down and they were bored again. And then there'd be another gentle knock on the door, and somebody would come in with a tin whistle, or what some people call the penny flute. Now, a tin whistle has a sound that sounds like somebody is running a cheese grater through your ears and cleaning your brain. It's horrible, but you'd be so bored, you'd let them in. And then there'd be another gentle knock on the door, and you'd look out the curtains, and it might be a kid with a drum kit. And no matter how bored you weren't going to let a kid with a drum kit in, because that would just go through your head. But finally, late in the evening, when you were about to go to bed and all the knocks on the door had stopped, there'd be another gentle knock on the door. And you'd look out the curtains and there'd be someone there, and they wouldn't have a fiddle, and they wouldn't have a tin whistle, and they wouldn't have a drum kit. And that was the storyteller. And you'd let the storyteller in. Now, boys and girls, if you've ever tried to use a television, you know you need your remote control, and you need to find the right buttons, and then you need to find the remote control. Somebody's probably sitting on it like I am now. And by the time you finally get it, it's so complicated. A storyteller is so much easier to use than a television. All you do is you sit them down, you give them a glass, you pour some whiskey into the glass, and they've started. And you can't stop them. They just keep going. And that's the great thing about storytellers. We have so many stories. We have long stories. We have short stories. We have old stories. We have new stories. I'd love to tell you the newest story in the world, but it hasn't been invented yet. I'd love to tell you the oldest story in the world, but it's a bit old and cobwebby. I'd love to tell you the shortest story in the world. Once upon a long ago, they all lived happily ever after, but that's a bit boring. So I'm going to tell you some of my favorite stories tonight, and I hope you enjoy them, and I hope all the people watching live, the millions of people around the world who aren't watching live but who'll tune in over the next few days, I really hope you enjoy these stories. I'd like to start by telling you the story of a friend of mine. This friend, he's a tall, handsome young man. His name is Zebediah Snotnose. Now, Zebediah Snotnose, as I said, was he's taller than that. He's taller than that. He's taller than that. He's about that size. And he has a small, crooked nose with a little bit of hair coming out of this nostril, a little bit of hair coming out of this nostril, and some hair coming out of this ear. Does that sound handsome? And his nose is a little crooked this way, and then a little crooked this way. And he has 3 green teeth, 1 yellow tooth, and 2 orange tooths. Does that sound handsome, boys and girls? My friend Zebediah Snotnose fell in love with the most gorgeous girl in all of Ireland. In fact, she was prettier than that. She was the most gorgeous girl in all of County Clare. And he fell in love with her, and he decided, I'm going to marry Bindi Bandy Legs. Now, boys and girls, if you're going to marry a girl, what do you have to do? There's a simple step, and it's not kissing her. It's not getting down on your knees and proposing. Oh no, long before any of that happens, the first thing you have to do is you have to go out on a date. You have to knock on the girl's door and bring her out. And Zebediah Snotnose decided, tonight's the night, I'm going on a date with Bindi Bandy Legs. He got up, he began walking out of his house. His mother said, Zebediah, where are you going? He said, I'm off to meet Bindi Bandy Legs. So off he went, through the woods, got to Bindi's house, knocked on Bindi's door. Bindi opened the door. She said, hello, Zebediah Snotnose. Have you brought me a... What do you think, boys and girls? All together, have you brought me a present? Let's try that again. Have you brought me a present? Ooh, said Zebediah. Silly me, I forgot. But maybe you have one for me. And did she have a present for him, boys and girls? She had a lovely, sharp, shiny needle. And he looked at the little needle and he said, ah, that's lovely. And he took off his glasses to look more carefully, and he, poked himself in the eye. And he was walking home carrying the needle, and he got tired of carrying the needle, boys and girls, so he stuck the needle in a haystack. He said, don't worry, I'll remember where it is. He got home to his mum, and his mum said, did Bindi Bandy Legs give you a present? Oh, she did. She gave me a lovely, sharp, shiny needle. But I stuck it in a haystack and I lost it. Do you think his mum was happy? Oh no, his mum was furious. She looked at him like this. She got so annoyed, her face turned purple, steam came out of her ears, and all her hair fell out in a big clump on the floor. She said, Zebediah Snot-Nose, you're a silly sausage. What are you? You're a silly... That's your turn to shout sausage. You're a silly sausage. Everybody knows if somebody gives you a present of a sharp, shiny needle, you stick it in your sleeve to keep it safe. Ah, he said, I'll remember tomorrow. The next day he left the house. Where are you off to? I'm off to visit Bindi Bandylegs. So he went off through the woods. Arrived at her door, knocked on the door. She opened the door. Hello, Zebediah Snot-Nose. Have you brought me a...
Present.
Present.
Oh, silly me, he said. I forgot, but maybe you have one for...
Me.
Yes, and she said she did. I have a lovely, sharp, shiny knife. And she took out this lovely, big, long, shiny, sharp knife. And Zebediah looked at the knife, and then he remembered his mother's words of advice. And he stuck the knife in his sleeve, and he nearly chopped his hand off. He went home like this, going, ouch, ouch, ouch. His mum wasn't happy. His mum said, you silly sausage. If somebody gives you a present of a knife, you take the knife very carefully and you put it in your pocket to keep it safe. Ah, he said, I'll remember tomorrow. The next day he left the house. Where are you off to? Said Zebediah Snot-Nose. Off to visit Bindi Bandylegs. So off he went, through the woods, knocked on the door. She opened the door. She said, hello, Zebediah Snot-Nose. Have you brought me a...
Present.
Oh, silly me, he said. I forgot, but maybe you have one for...
Me.
And did she have a present for him? She had a lovely, big, dirty, hairy, smelly billy goat with horns at one end, curly horns, a little smig of a beard and a small tail at the other end. And he looked at the big billy goat. And he remembered his mother's words. And he grabbed the billy goat and he put the billy goat in his pocket and he limped home like this. Because it's very hard to walk with a billy goat in your pocket. And when he got home, the poor goat had smothered. His mother wasn't happy. She said, you silly sausage, if somebody gives you a present of a billy goat, you tie a rope around his neck and you lead it gently home. Very good advice. I'll remember that tomorrow. The next day he left the house. Where are you off to? I'm off to visit Bindi Bandylegs. He walked through the woods, knocked on her door. She opened the door. She said, hello, Zebediah Snot-Nose. Have you brought me a...
Present.
Oh, silly me. I forgot. But maybe you have one for me. Did she have a present, boys and girls? She did. She had a lovely, big, huge, ginormous plate full of sausages. 756 sausages. They were turkey sausages, because I know there's a lot of people in Morocco listening to this. Don't worry, they were turkey sausages. A huge plate of sausages. And he looked at the sausage, all the sausages, and he remembered his mother's advice. And he tied a piece of string to the top sausage, and he walked home, gently dragging all the sausages along the ground behind him. And a little dog about your size followed him home and ate every last one. So when he got home to his mum, all he had was a bit of string with nothing hanging off it except a fat dog. His mum wasn't happy. She said, you silly sausage. Everyone knows if somebody gives you a present of a plate of sausages, you balance the plate carefully on your head and you walk home carefully. Ah, he said, I'll remember tomorrow. The next day he left the house. Where are you off to? Off to visit Bindi Bandylegs. Went through the woods, knocked on the door. Hello, Zebediah Snot-Nose. Have you brought me a...
Present.
Silly me, I forgot. But maybe you have one for me. Did she have a present, boys and girls? She had a lovely, huge, big, smelly, pink pig. And he looked at the lovely pig, and he remembered his mother's advice, and he picked up the pig, and he balanced the pig carefully on his head, and he walked home like this. And whatever way he walked, didn't he accidentally move his fingers? And didn't he accidentally tickle the pig? And the pig began to struggle a little bit. And then he accidentally tickled the pig a bit more. And the pig kicked him in the nose and broke his nose. He got home to his mother. His mother said, did Bindi give you a present? Oh, she did. She did. She gave me a sharp. She gave me a big smelly pig, and it broke my nose. Oh, she wasn't happy. She said, you silly sausage. Everyone knows if somebody gives you a gift of a pig, you tie a rope around the pig's neck, you lead it gently home, you tie it in the stable, and you feed it some raw carrots, some potato peels, some straw, some water, and some mud. Ooh, said Zebediah, I'll remember tomorrow. The next day, he left the house. Where are you off to? Off to visit Bindi Bandylegs. Knocked on the door. She opened the door. Hello, Zebediah Snot-Nose. Have you brought me a...
Present.
Oh, silly me, I forgot. But maybe you have one for me. And did she have a gift? She had a... Oh, no. No. She said, I'm sorry, Zebediah. I have no gifts left. I gave you a needle. You lost it. I gave you a knife. You cut yourself. I gave you a goat. You smothered it. I gave you a sausage. You let that dog eat it. I gave you a pig. You let it break your nose. I've run out of gifts. I'll tell you what, she said. I'll be your present. I'll marry you. And isn't that what he wanted, boys and girls? Was he happy? He was happy. He was so happy, he jumped for joy. He jumped so high, his head hit off the roof. He ended up with a lump on the side of his head like a duck's egg. And then he remembered his mother's advice. And he ran up to Bindi Bandylegs, and instead of giving her a hug, he tied a rope around her neck and led her home and tied her in the stable and fed her some raw carrots, some potato peels, some straw, some mud, and some water. Would you be happy if your boyfriend did that to you? Would you do that to your girlfriend? No, boys and girls, you would not. And Bindi was not happy. Bindi Bandylegs took the rope off her neck. She looked at him like this. She got so angry her face turned purple, steam came out of her ears, and all her beautiful golden hair fell down in a heap on the floor. She said, Zebediah Snot-Nose, you're a silly sausage. I'll never marry you now. And she was as good as her word. She ran away and she married somebody else. She married a lovely guy called Johnny Pinky Shoes. And they lived happily ever after, except for one small problem. People kept getting his name wrong and calling him Johnny Stinky Poos. And she became known as Bindi Stinky Poos. And as for my friend Zebediah Snot-Nose, he's still living all on his own with his mum. And I'm going to tell you, when I heard that story first, I cried so much my socks got wet. So I better follow with a happier story. What do you think, boys and girls? I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine. My friend is Larry. Now, here's the thing. Larry is not the most sensible person. If you look at your group of friends, we all have groups of friends, and if you look at your group of friends, isn't there always one idiot in every group of friends? Now, boys and girls, if you don't know who the idiot is, it's you. But in my group of friends, I know who the idiot is. We all know who the idiot is. It's Larry. Larry the loon, we call him, because he's always doing lunatic and silly things. I'll tell you, I met him recently, and he had a big smile on his face, like he had swallowed a banana sideways. I said, Larry, You're looking very happy. He said, Tony, I'm feeling very happy. Somebody gave me €100. That's a lot of money. I said, that's good. I said, that's very good. Oh, not so good, said Larry. It's not my money. I have to give it to someone. Oh, that's bad, said I. Not so bad, said Larry. I have to give it to a friend. And don't we all love giving money to our friends? Oh, that's good, said I. Not so good, said Larry. You know me in my head. I'll probably forget to give it to him. Oh, that's bad, said I. Not so bad, said Larry. I came up with a clever plan. That's good, said I. What's the plan? He said, here's the plan. He said, you know the way I love eating sandwiches? And I said, I know, you're always eating sandwiches. He said, yes. I remembered I had a sandwich in my hat, and I took out the sandwich, and I opened up the sandwich, and there was one slice of chicken and one slice of ham. And I got the €100, two €50 notes, and I put them down on the slice of chicken. And then I put some ketchup over them, and I spread the ketchup to hold the chicken in place and to hold the notes there. And then I put back on the slice of cheese. And then I put on the last slice of bread. And I put the sandwich in my pocket. And I said, that €50 is safe now. I wasn't so sure, but I said, that's good. Oh, not so good, said Larry. Didn't all that hard work make me hungry? Oh, that's bad, I said. Not so bad, said Larry. Didn't I remember I had a sandwich in my pocket? That's good, said I. Not so good, said Larry. I took out the sandwich and I ate it, and I ate the €100 with it. Oh, that's bad, said I. Not so bad, said Larry. Remember, it wasn't my money, it was your money. Yes, that's right. My friend ate my €100. That's the sort of friend I have. So, boys and girls, if you have a friend like Larry, be very careful. Last Halloween, now where I live in Ireland, Halloween is huge because we invented Halloween and we like to scare children when they come knocking at our doors. And last year, I thought the best way of scaring children was to hang a cage outside my door. And what would I put inside in the cage? That was scary. Maybe a teacher threatening to give them homework. But I thought, no, I can go scarier than that. I thought, what if I put a little small vampire in the cage? And you'd come knocking at my door, and the vampire would suddenly lean out of the cage and bite you on the neck. That would scare you, wouldn't it, boys and girls? I thought, where do you get a vampire? You have to go to the graveyard late at night to find a vampire. And myself and a group of friends, we agreed that was what we were going to do. We were going to go to the graveyard, find the vampire, and hang him up outside my house. And of course, we had to ask Larry to come with us because you can't leave your friends out, can you? So I thought, give Larry the simplest job in the world. I said, Larry, I've just one job for you. Bring the flask. You know what a flask is, don't you, boys and girls? You keep things hot in it. I thought I'll just give Larry the simple job. Well, on the day we met at the graveyard, it was late at night. The moon was just coming up. And we all met, 6 of us. And Larry walked up to us with a big smile on his face. And I looked at him and he pointed at me. He said, ha ha, you think I've forgotten? I haven't forgotten. I wrote it on a sandwich and I remembered. It's in the bag. And he opened his bag and he took out not a flask, but a jug, a glass jug. And I said, Larry, that's a jug. He said, flask, jug, what's the difference? I said, for one thing, you can't keep the coffee hot in a jug. He said, what coffee? That's when I knew it was going to be a long night. He'd forgotten to bring the coffee. Anyway, we went to the graveyard and we found the grave that the vampire was meant to live in. And I rolled up my sleeve and I put my hand in and I felt around. And I felt something soft and I thought, is this the vampire's nose? But it was just a mouse. I took my hand out. We had missed the vampire. That meant we had to spend the whole night in the graveyard waiting for the vampire. And I thought, what am I going to do now? And I thought, I know what I'm going to do. We'll sit down around the tombstone and we'll play cards. And we played cards for a while. And somebody had brought a Monopoly board. And we played Monopoly. And we nearly had a fight the way you always do when you play Monopoly. And then, then we were getting tired. And we were getting hungry. And we were getting thirsty. And we were getting cold. And we were getting grumpy. And I said, do you know what I'd love around now? I'd love a lovely hot cup of coffee. And Larry said, yeah, why didn't somebody bring a... Oh, yes, it was me. I forgot to bring the mug of coffee, didn't I? And I said, yes, Larry, you did. And then one of my friends came up with a clever plan. He said, do you see, just about 2 kilometers down the road, there's a 24-hour garage. Larry, since you forgot the coffee, you go and bring back 6 mugs of coffee. And Larry stood up and he said, I will. What am I going to hold the coffee in? And I said, in the stupid jug. He said, yes. And he picked up the jug and he walked off through the graveyard, around the tombstones, around one of the crosses, towards the church. And just as he got near the church, a tiny vampire ran right between his legs. Now, if Larry had been sensible, Larry would have caught the vampire and we could have gone home. Or he could have closed his legs and trapped the vampire. We could have gone home. Or he could have just shouted, vampire, and I could have caught the vampire and we'd go home. What did Larry do? He just looked and said, and turned back. And as he turned back, the side of the jug hit the side of the church. And all the glass shattered and fell at his feet in glittering shards. And Larry never noticed. He walked right over the glass, missed the crunch, and walked the whole way to the garage. And he walked into the garage, he walked up to the man behind the counter. He said, 6 mugs of coffee, my good man. And the man in the garage said, and how are you going to bring away the 6 mugs of coffee? He said, in my I'm fairly sure I had a jug when I set out. It seems I only remembered to bring the handle. Then Larry had the first thought that had ever crossed his tiny little brain. He said, I know what. We'll put the coffee in my hat. And they poured the first cup in. They poured the second cup in. They poured the third cup in. They poured the fourth cup in. They poured the 5th cup in. The hat was full. Now, a sensible person might have walked home with the hat in one hand and the 6th cup of coffee in the other hand. A different sort of sensible person might have drank their own coffee and walked home carefully like this with the coffee. Larry got the second thought to ever cross his tiny little mind. He said, isn't there always a little hollow at the bottom of a hat? He got the hat and he turned it around like this. And he very carefully poured the last cup of coffee into the hollow at the top of the hat. And he walked back to us in the graveyard, very carefully like this. And very proudly, he laid down the hat in front of us. And he gave us each a straw. And we looked down, the 6 of us with our straws. And we looked down at the tiny little puddle of brown coffee in the middle of Larry's hat. And I said, Larry, there are 6 of us. There's not enough coffee in that tiny puddle of brown at the top of your hat. And Larry said, do you think I'm an idiot? He said, I know that. He said, there's 1 cup there and 6 cups and 6 cups. No cups. Yes, all the coffee was on Larry's shirt. That's the sort of friend I'm lumbered with, boys and girls. On top of all that, Larry had a wet head, and the only thing we caught that night, I caught no leprechaun, Larry caught a cold. So there you go. That's my friend Larry. I'm sorry for bringing him up. I'll tell you about another friend. Well, he's not really a friend of mine. He's more of a neighbor of mine. This neighbor, his name is Tommy. We call him Tommy the Tapper. And I'll tell you why we call him Tommy the Tapper, because he is the meanest man in my village of Conna in East Cork. Tommy the Tapper, he thinks we are all human ATM machines. He can just tap us and we'll give him money. You'd meet him in the shop and he'd just tap you. He'd say, I'm a bit short this week. Can you loan me 10 euros? I'll give it back to you next week. Or you'd meet him in the chipper. He'd say, oh, would you like a burger? So would I. You buy it this week. I'll buy it next week. Or you'd be in the bar or in the pub and he'd just tap you, say, look, could you buy me a pint? I'm a little short. He was always tapping people for money. And the only thing he liked more than tapping people for money was not giving that money back. Oh, we never saw it back. Larry would tap you. That money was gone. He never repaid it. And the only thing that Tommy the Tapper liked more than not giving money back, and this is a bit of an odd one, he loved cheese and onion flavoured crisps. Boys and girls, you love crisps, don't you? Everyone loves crisps. But Tommy loved crisps on a far deeper level. He really, really loved crisps. Well, one night, just a couple of months ago, at the end of autumn, there were a group of us in the local bar. And Tommy was in and he was tapping everyone to buy him a drink. And I thought, I'm not going to buy him a drink because if I buy him a drink, he'll never buy me a drink. So I said goodnight to everyone and I went home. I put on my hat. I walked out of the bar and I walked towards my house on the edge of town. And as I walked towards my house on the edge of town, I passed what we call the fairy fort. Now, those of you who live in Ireland will be very familiar with fairy forts. They're the forts and the hills where the little people, the fairies, the jinn, or as we call them in Ireland, the leprechauns. It's where they live. Now, a lot of Irish people don't believe in leprechauns. You say to an Irish person, what's a leprechaun? And they straight away think of a small little lad in a green coat and a silly top hat. That's not a leprechaun. That's an American tourist over for St. Patrick's Day. Real leprechauns are small, angry men. And let me tell you, they're very good at one thing and very bad at one thing. What they're good at is making shoes. What they're bad at is making clothes. And if you're very bad at making clothes and you don't like spending money, what do? You go to people's houses and you steal the clothes off their clothesline. And if you're small, you can only steal the children's clothes. And that's why we think of leprechauns wearing the fancy jackets and the waistcoats and the flouncy shirts and the silly hats. Because when we first started noticing leprechauns 400 years ago, they only stole off the best houses. And the best houses always wore the best clothes. And that's the way leprechauns were dressed. Today, if a leprechaun comes to your house to steal from your clothesline, what's he going to get? He's going to get a school uniform or your Paw Patrol pajamas. And leprechauns do not like wearing Paw Patrol pajamas. So what you are actually going to see, the leprechaun is going to steal. They don't like the school uniform, sorry. They're going to steal the Paw Patrol pajamas. So here's what you need to look out for, boys and girls. If you see a kid walking ahead of you with bright red flaming hair and they're wearing Paw Patrol pajamas, that might be a leprechaun. If they turn around and they have a big red beard, that might be a leprechaun. And if you look down and they're wearing the best shoes you have ever in your life seen, that's definitely a leprechaun, and be very careful. And the leprechauns live in these fairy forts at the edge of towns. Now, I never believed that. I always thought that the leprechauns and the fairy forts was just in people's heads. What I thought is the fairy forts came from lazy farmers who were too lazy to plough the field. And they'd go home and their wife would say, "Did you plough that field?" "Oh, I couldn't. There was a fairy fort. I had to leave it alone." And maybe some of them are just like that. But as I was walking past the fairy fort that night when I left the pub, and I left Tommy the Tapper up there trying to get money off everyone, as I walked by, whatever way I looked in the moonlight, the fairy fort, there was a little opening at the side of the hill where there never had been an opening before. Now, if you see an opening in the side of a hill where there never was an opening before, heed my advice. Put your hat down over your eyes, turn away, and go home fast. It's none of your business. And that's exactly what I did. Put the hat down, turned away, and walked home as fast as I could. It wasn't my business. The next man out of the pub was Tommy the Tapper. And as Tommy walked down the road, he had forgotten his hat. And as he walked in the moonlight, he looked over and he saw a gap in the side of a hill where there never should have been a gap before. Tommy should have pulled his hat down over his head and turned away. He had no hat. He turned towards the hill and he walked right across the field and he reached the hill, and the small little opening at the side of the hill was actually a tunnel. And the only thing closing the tunnel off was a web of thick cobwebs. And he put his hand in and he pulled the cobwebs aside, and it made a screeching sound like the gates of hell being torn asunder. And he got one leg in and stretched in, and got his shoulder in, and he got his head in, and he got his other hand in, and he moved his whole body in, and then he snapped forward and pulled his bottom in, and he walked down the tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel, there was an eerie yellowish orange glow, and he walked straight down. And at the end, he found a small little alcove, a tiny room just off to the side, lit by one single candle. And the candlelight was glowing off 12 bags of gold. And Tommy thought, "I've hit the jackpot here. I'm tapping a leprechaun. This is the big time." And he went to steal the gold, and then he stopped and he thought, leprechauns are very angry. Do I really want a leprechaun chasing me? Then he thought, no, I'll just steal one bag of gold. He looked around and he grabbed one bag of gold and he lifted it up, and then he dropped it down and he started thinking, I never saw a leprechaun at school, but maybe they can count. And if he can count, and he notices one bag missing, I'm in trouble. So then he came up with a plan. He just stole one coin, a single coin, but he stole a single coin from the top of every single one of the 12 sacks. And he put the 12 gold coins in his pocket, and he turned around and he began walking up the tunnel. And he was nearly outside when he said, do you know what I love? Even more than tapping people for money, stealing gold. And he walked right down the hill and he grabbed one more coin from the top of each sack, filled his pockets, turned around and began walking. Then he came back. He said, do you know what I love even more than stealing money? Stealing more money. He went up and down that tunnel another 13 times. And the only thing that stopped him in the end was he had so much money in his pockets, his pants fell down. And he pulled his pants up as high as it would go. It would only go a bit above his knees. And he went home like this. And that night, there were 2 moons in the sky. One there and one full moon there, because his pants had fallen down. Well, he got home, and none of us noticed anything, except over the next couple of weeks, Tommy stopped tapping us for money. And we thought, yes, that's good. And then we noticed that all the cheese and onion crisps ran out in the local shop. And then we noticed Tommy getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And then we noticed the delivery trucks arriving to Tommy's house. Tommy seemed to have endless money now, and he was getting nothing but bags of crisps. And one day I met him in the village, and he was looking very fat and looking very pale and not looking healthy. I said, Tommy, you're not looking well. He said, I should be looking very well. I'm a vegan now. I said, what do you mean you're a vegan? He said, all I eat is cheese and onion crisps. And as you know, crisps are potatoes. That makes me a vegan. Vegans are healthy. I said, I don't think that's the way it works. I don't think a bag of crisps counts as one of your 5-a-day vegetables. But there was no talking to Tommy. Tommy went about his business and got fatter and fatter. And one day he didn't appear in the village. The next day he didn't appear. Somebody said, Tony, you live closest to him. Will you go and do a wellness check? So I knocked on his door, and normally you'd get the same friendly reply, get lost, I'm busy, because he wouldn't want to let you in case you'd want a cup of tea, and he wouldn't waste the price of a tea bag on you. But this time he said, I'm sick. And I shouted in, is there anything I can do for you? He said, no, I'll be grand. I'll just eat more vegetables and I'll recover. Well, that was the last time I saw Tommy, but apparently a few nights later there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the night, it was the afternoon, just after school had let out. There was a knock on the door, and Tommy thought, who's knocking on my door? It's probably some kids annoying me. And he was in bed and not feeling well, so he ignored the knock on the door. But the knock came again and he ignored it. The knock came again and he ignored it. And then he shouted, get lost! And whoever was out there started kicking at the door. So, feeling very angry, he pulled himself out of bed, walked over, opened the door, and he looked. Nobody. He looked. Nobody. He looked that way. Nobody. He said, stupid kids! And he slammed the door and he turned around. And there was the stupid kid sitting by his bedside. A kid in Paw Patrol pajamas with bright red hair. The kid had obviously run between his legs. He said, kid, scram! And the kid turned around. And the kid had a bright red beard. Tommy began to get worried, but he brazened it out. And then he looked down. The kid had the best shoes Tommy had ever seen. Yes, Tommy had been caught by the leprechaun. But Tommy blazoned it out. He went to bed. He pulled the bedclothes up. He said, get lost. I'm not well. And then he reached for a bag of crisps and started eating. And the leprechaun said, they look lovely. And he grabbed a bag of crisps and ate them. And Tommy said, here, they're my crisps. Very nice crisps they are too, said the leprechaun. And when he finished the bag, he threw the wrapper on Tommy's bed. And the leprechaun spent the rest of the day eating crisps, throwing the wrapper on Tommy's bed, eating crisps, throwing the wrapper on Tommy's bed. And eventually there was a huge pile of wrappers on Tommy's bed. Around 6 o'clock, Tommy said, I wish I wasn't feeling sick. If I was feeling well, I would get up and I would throw you head first out the window. The leprechaun said, don't worry, Tommy. You won't be sick for long. And on hearing that, Tommy's spirit revived. But by 8 o'clock, Tommy was feeling very bad, and the pile of crisps on his bed had just grown. And he said, I thought you told me I was going to get better. The leprechaun said, oh, no, Tommy, I never said you were going to get better. I said you wouldn't be sick for long, and you won't be. As soon as the moon comes over the horizon, you will die. The leprechaun went back to eating crisps. Now at 10 o'clock, the moon came over the windowsill, and the first moonbeam entered the room. And Tommy looked up in triumph. He said, I'm not dead yet. And the leprechaun said, patience, young man. And over the next 42 minutes, the moonbeam crept across the floor, up the leg of the bed, across the pile of crisp bags. And at 48 minutes past 10, it hit Tommy's cheek. A minute later, it approached his eyeball. And at 10:50, the moonbeam hit Tommy's eye. Tommy's eyes glazed over. Tommy died. And none of us knew anything about this. The leprechaun stood up, grabbed all his gold, and was about to leave. When he thought, you know what I like? Even more than getting my gold back. Those cheese and onion crisps are a new thing on me. I'll have another bag. And he stayed there until he ate every bag in Tommy's room. And the pile of crisp wrappers rose on the bed. And the leprechaun was just about to leave. And he said, you know what? I'll just search the house. And he found the attic full of crisp bags, the kitchen full of crisp bags, the bathtub full of crisp bags. And he ate every last one. And 1 minute before dawn broke, he belched, a belch that could be heard 3 parishes away. And he threw the last empty crisp wrapper on Tommy's bed, and he disappeared. And the hole at the side of the hill disappeared. And we've never seen the leprechaun since. But a few weeks later, all my neighbours were saying, will you check on Tommy? So I went and I checked. No sound when I knocked on the door, so I let myself in. The kitchen was spotless. You could have eaten off the floor, which is just as well, because Tommy wouldn't have given you a plate. The bathroom was spotless, not a crisp in the bathtub. Finally, I reached the bedroom. I turned the handle of the door. I couldn't push it. There was something pushing against me. So I got my shoulder and I pushed in. And then I got knocked on my behind by an avalanche of crisp wrappers. I stood up, I waded through the crisp wrappers. I could feel the legs of the bed against my thigh, and I reached down through the crisp wrappers. I found something soft. Tommy's eyeball! I parted the crisp wrappers, and there was Tommy's dead face looking at me. A little spider ran out of his nose and into his mouth, and I screamed. Let that be a warning to you, boys and girls. If you see an opening at the side of a hill where there never was an opening before, don't be like Tommy. Get your hat, pull it right down over your eyes, turn around, and walk away like a sensible person. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm going to turn around and walk away. And I really hope you enjoyed the stories, boys and girls. It has been fantastic to see the people that join me live. I am really appreciative. The people that will join me, I was going to say dead, but of course you won't be dead if you're not joining me live. You'll just be joining me later. I hope you enjoy them as well. And thanks to the Storytelling Cafe and to John Rowe and to all the people who watched for making all this happen. Thank you and good night.
And thank you, Mr. Anthony Galvin-Healey or Tony Baloney, depending on what you prefer. Now, what's coming up? Now, that's fantastic. If Louis was here, I'd normally say, Louis, do we want him back? And Louis would answer, definitely yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was told that Louis
Yes.
often watches. So, Louis, if you're watching this later, Louis, I was told to say a big hello to you. This is a small hello. Hello, Louis. We're coming for the bigger hello. Louis, 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 hello! And I hope you do get to watch it later, Louis.
So, what have we got coming up? Wednesday, we have Justine Demir running her Tales and Tunes, 7 o'clock. So come on, sing a song, tell a story, poem, do something, stand on your head. No, I shouldn't say that with Tony in the room. Tony will come across with something even more ludicrous. And next Friday, we stay in Ireland. In fact, we stay in Cork because next Friday is Maria Gillan. So for children's stories. So, and then we've got some interesting stuff coming up. Avita on Wednesday. I'll announce all this next week. She's starting a whole series of monthly things where people can come on and do elemental stories. And I think Earth is the element for the first Wednesday, which I think is going to be the Wednesday before Easter. Let me see. But I'll confirm that next week, and it will go up on the schedule eventually. So yeah, that'll be Wednesday the 16th, and then Narinja is he's carrying on with her personal stories. I'm not sure of the date of that, but it's exciting times at the cafe. But right now, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Baba C, who came to watch. Thank you, Satan. Satan hasn't put their camera on. So I wanted to know what Satan looked like forever, but it looks like I'm not going to tonight. Thank you,
Probably
Waleed.
red hat and red horns.
Yes, President. Thank you, Waleed, for flying the magic carpet. And good night, everybody. And thank you, Bubba C, as always, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Bubba,
from
for listening.
Washington,
It's great to
D.C.
have an audience there.
Thank you. I mean, you are a delight. If I laugh any harder, I'm going to split something, and we don't want that. You are a delight,
Thank you.
John Rowe,
Thank
for
you.
being the wonderful person you are as well. Ah,
Okay.
Tony.
Well, look after yourselves, everybody. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
To be continued. And good night, Waleed. And Tony, you don't know about this, but I have to say this, otherwise Waleed won't close it. I have to say,
Yeah.
Me out.
Good night.
Good night. All right, Waleed. I think I'm going to go. Oh, no, it's too late for lunch. I'm going to have an early dinner.